Hi, I'm Karin Hurt, and I'm here with our next edition of Asking for a Friend Live. And I am absolutely delighted today because we have a very special guest, Seth Godin. Seth Godin, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Love that intro. I forgot my light bulb today, but I'll do my best.
So, we are here to talk about your new book, The Song of Significance. But as we start, I have to say why this is so special for me. You have been really significant in my career. And I know I've told you this before, but just for the tribe here, I find inspiration in two ways. First, one, I read everything that you write. But also, I have been encouraged to ship early in my journey. You said ship it, and I shipped it, and that was really good. And now, what I'm really working to understand from you and watch you is how do you scale significance? If you've got something important to say, how do you do that in a way that serves the world in the way that you think you can? And you give me daily courage to do that. My husband and business partner, David Diane, always are saying, God, how did he know that we were dealing with that issue right this very minute? So, first of all, thank you for being here. So, you have two grounding questions you have many grounding questions in your work, but there were two that really resonated for me. And one is, what if we created the best job someone ever had? And what would today be like if you could honestly describe your job in that way? And I'd love to start with like why did you do this work? Why those questions?
I think we can all watch billionaires cruelly firing disabled people online for kicks. We can watch corporations dealing with massive turnover and replacing people with AI. We can watch people stressed out of their minds, or we can decide to do something about it. And what I've seen in the last year or two is that we are really finally waking up to the idea that the purpose of culture is not to enable industrialism. The purpose of industrialism, of capitalism, is to enable culture. And it turns out, what a lovely bonus, if we work with people who are engaged and enrolled and connected, all the other metrics get better. So, in fact, this isn't about less, it's about more. It's not about lowering standards, it's about raising standards. And the era of the stopwatch is gone. And I am really motivated, a little upset, but also optimistic about what is possible right now. But we need to talk about it.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And you did some really important research, significant research. You surveyed 10,000 people in 90 countries at least, and you asked about what people liked about their best job, what made their best job the best job. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Okay, so what does the boss think? The boss in the industrial entities thinks, I know what people want. I'll pay them a lot. I'll let them tell other people what to do, and I won't fire them. And so those are the three things that bosses offer you when you say I have to leave or whatever. But I added 11 other choices to the list. And what I heard from 90 countries, almost unanimously, is the three things I just mentioned don't really matter. What people actually describe as the elements of their best job is they accomplished more than they thought they could. They worked with people who treated them with respect. They did work that they were proud of. They were part of something. They found meaning. And of course, that seems obvious. So if it's obvious that A, empowered, enrolled, eager workers are going to do better work, and B, what they want is what they tell us they want, then why aren't we building that? It's really straightforward. The reason we're not building it is because we want to tell people what to do, as opposed to creating the conditions for them to do what they are capable of.
Yeah, yeah. And so what do you say when people say that's great, that's an ideal world, and but it's hard because I have all these metrics I've got to accomplish. I've got all this pressure that's coming down. I got Wall Street guidance. Like, yeah, I ideal world I do that, but I don't have that luxury.
Okay, so it's easy to argue with Milton Friedman, partly because he was wrong and partly because he's gone. And Milton argued that the only function of a corporation was to maximize short-term shareholder value. And that's just nonsense, made it up out of whole cloth, embraced by CEOs trying to enrich themselves. But here's the thing. First of all, it's not easy to do the kind of work I'm talking about. It's actually more difficult. It's more difficult to create the conditions for people to bring kokoro, their heart, to work than it is to just say, do what I say or you're fired. So we've taken a lazy path. But the second thing is, the day you went public and sold ownership of your company to the shortest term thinkers in the world who are not very well informed and are very angry, that was probably a mistake. But you already did that. I can't help you with that. What I can help you with is the fact that you're going to get what you reward. You're going to get the shareholders that you earn. So if you say to the shareholders, as they did at Yahoo when I worked there, oh yeah, we're going to make the stock price go up as much as we can tomorrow, then you forget to partner with Google, buy Netscape, and build the next generation of the internet because you're watching tomorrow's stock price. Mm-hmm. And in the end, everyone got hosed because tomorrow's stock price is not an indicator of much of value. So what I'm arguing for is, if you're really a professional, you'll step up and say, I can see what works, and we're going to do this. And if you don't want to hang on for that ride, here is a different company you can invest in. And if the stock goes down a little bit in the short run, we'll have to live with that. Because what I can prove to you is the company we're going to build is one that is more vibrant, more profitable, and more resilient.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So James Harmon is saying, how do you make sure you match what your people want to do with the company needs while allowing them space to be creative and self-directed? So James is not a CEO. I think that's a real question for some of these listeners, right? So what can I do?
Yeah, it's a great question. So let me be really clear. Management is important, but so is leadership, and they're not the same thing. Managers pay people to do what they did yesterday, but faster and cheaper. They use authority to enforce their will. They're on the org chart. McDonald's, United Airlines, pacemaker companies, they need management because what they're getting paid for is hitting their Six Sigma numbers. But if you work in a place where change is present, then leadership is essential. And leadership has nothing to do with where you are on the org chart. It is possible to be a barista at a 5-person coffee shop and lead because you can establish and raise standards, because you can engage as a human with customers who are willing to pass 3 other places on their way to you because it's worth it. So when we decide to seek significance, if you're not the boss or the CEO, we start with this. What is the smallest possible unit of significance you can create? Not how do I change everything? The smallest. How can you change one interaction with one person? How can you take responsibility and give away credit? How can you not wait for authority? Those tiny, tiny units. Do it again, do it again, do it again. Because we can shift the culture. That's the only way the culture shifts. It doesn't shift because the CEO sent out a memo. It shifts because that's what things are like around here.
So when you talk about, what is the smallest thing you can do? And in your book, you don't call them competencies, but you call, these new ways of working that are what we should be hiring for, what we should be teaching, what we should be encouraging and building. And I was thinking about, if I want to take responsibility for having the best job I ever had, which of those are most critical? And can you unpack a few of those for us?
Okay, so here's the story of the blue cards. I got asked by a friend about 9 years ago to show up at Allen and Company, very fancy investment bank in New York. They had 25 summer interns who of course had connections to get a job like that. You can imagine how privileged they were in their little bow ties and everything else. And they'd been there for 4 or 5, 6 weeks already. And I walk in and I figure I need to talk to these folks about something other than getting picked, because they're good at getting picked and getting an A and complying. So I walk in, I say, on my way in, I grab a stack of 3x5 index cards, blue ones. And I walk in, I say, on my way here, I got a phone call from Warren Buffett. No, Bill Gates. I don't know, somebody like that. And they said they have this huge project. They have a budget of $1 million. The person who runs it's going to get paid $300,000, and you have $100,000 for each of the 3 people from this group that you pick to help you for the next 2 weeks. So it's lucrative, it's high profile, it's challenging. Write down the names of the 3 people in this room that you would pick to be on the project with you. And there's all this discomfort in the room because it's socially awkward to do that. I say, no, don't worry. I am not going to make you tell everyone which 3 names you put down. Okay, so wait till 3 names. I say, okay, 3 questions. First question, how many of you think the same 3 names came up over and over again? Question 2, how many of you think your name came up more than average? And there's a lot of discomfort around this because people know the same 3 names came up a lot, and their hunch is their name wasn't on the list. And I said, so the real question is, if you had gotten here 6 weeks ago, knowing that this was going to happen, could you have acted differently this summer? So you would have been one of those 3 people. And everyone agreed. And I said, it's not because you're good at Excel. It's not because you understand how to use this or that. These are hard skills, easy to measure skills we can put on your resume or your LinkedIn profile. I said, that's not how these 3 names got on here. They got on here because these people have real skills. They're still skills. They're just harder to measure. These people have creativity and persistence and generosity and energy and charisma, and they can make a promise and keep it, and they can look you in the eye. These human skills are what we actually need in all the people around us. Because if all we need is mediocre copywriting, I got an AI, I'll do that for free.
Yeah. It's interesting. I have this a freelancer in the Philippines who does art for us and does our lions. And yesterday I got out of an interaction with him, and I turned to David and I said, what he does, who he is, how he shows up brings me such joy. And it's what you're talking about. And it's the energy, it's the creativity, it's I get the vision. Let me try it 5 ways. And you pick, yeah. And he's not making a ton of money, but he is what we call skipping to work, right? He loves what he does. He finds satisfaction in the art, and it wants to be part of something bigger. And so that, anybody can, right? You just have to find it.
Yeah, exactly. And so what the people who are skeptical have been so thoroughly indoctrinated, brainwashed by a system that starts when they're 4 years old. What we train kids to do when they're 7 is ask, will this be on the test? That's a symptom. School was invented by industrialists to train people to be compliant. If you walk into any classroom of 5-year-olds and say, raise your hand if you're an artist, every kid will raise their hand. And if you walk into a classroom with 10-year-olds, almost no one will, because we beat it out of them.
So where does someone start? If someone is watching this and saying, gosh, I really do want to have the best job ever, where would you encourage them to begin?
Well, I mentioned earlier the dichotomy between authority and responsibility. If you show up and start taking responsibility, but give away credit, people are going to get in line for you to do that again. If you demand authority and permission before you make things better, you're going to be waiting a very long time. So where we begin is by acknowledging that there are false proxies all around us. The things we measure that aren't accurate, they're just simply easy. Look past the false proxies and say, what could I do that would be missed if it were gone? How can I see someone with empathy and realize I don't know what they know. I don't need what they need. I don't see what they see. And that's okay. Because if you've got the freedom, the agency to tune in to Karin's extraordinary conversations, you have the agency to change at least how you're going to spend 10 minutes a day at work. And this works because we talk about it. And so the reason it's worth giving up a year of my life to make a book as opposed to 20 minutes to write a blog post is because if you hand somebody a book, you have to talk about it, right? If you buy a 5-pack and you get 25 of these, you're going to hand them out like candy. And if you hand them out, you got to talk about it. When David and Karin show up and give a keynote, the keynote's really powerful, but that's not what works. What works is what happens after they leave. Did we talk about what they said. And culture is the sum total of what we talk about.
Mm. Yeah. And having the right conversations and giving people the framework to have the right conversations is so vital. So we're in the midst of research for our next book. And in fact, we're swimming in data right now, and it's on conflict and collaboration. And a
Great
lot of
topic.
So one of the interesting things is in the last couple of years, people have said 70% say there's either the same or significantly more conflict than they've had in the past. And then we break down into what are the reasons. And a big one is this overwhelm of stress, understaffed, overworked. And so that's real. And then what are the outcomes of some of this? It's again, more stress. So we have these workplaces that people are feeling like really uptight, and that is creating conflict and aggravating conflict that's already there for a variety of other reasons. I'm curious because as you talk about creating significant work, one of the I really took away is give people more projects, like things that have a beginning and end that they can say, I built this, I did this. And yet with some people, if we were to go, I'm imagining some of our clients right now and say, and they're like, we are just hanging on here. So what would you like? How do you balance all that?
There's so much juiciness to decode here. And my short-term memory is terrible. So I may have to circle back a couple times. The first one, I care about words. Tension and stress are not the same thing. Stress is trauma. Stress is bad. Stress is when we need to be in two places at the same time. I want to leave, but I have to stay. That's stressful. Tension is good. Tension is what happens after someone says, knock, knock, who's there? Waiting. Tension is, will this work? Tension is, we're going to ship something. Tension is, it's 11:25 on Saturday night. We go live with this show in 5 minutes. These are things of tension. We need more tension because that's what happens when we are exploring the liminal stage between here and there. You said a lot of organizations are understaffed and overworked. In fact, I don't think that is largely correct. I think what happens is a lot of organizations are overmanaged. I think they're over-meetinged. I think there's an enormous amount of time spent on bureaucracy and covering your ass and being corporate and industrial, and not nearly enough time saying this might not work. Not nearly enough time saying, what do our customers need in this sea of change? And how do we progress this forward? And a lot of people at work who are feeling conflict and stress, it's because the industrial age has come for them, right? We didn't speak up when the steam shovel came for the ditch diggers. And we didn't speak up when the car assembly line made people into cogs. The phrase jerking people around came from the Ford assembly line. But now it's happening to people who, folks like you, interview for your book. And so they're saying, well, I'm feeling very controlled and constrained, and I'm doing work that I'm not proud of and that I don't really want to do. And I know that they're just going to get a computer to do it tomorrow. Because they are. That's what they're organized to do. They're racing to the bottom. Mm-hmm. And the problem with the race to the bottom is you might win. And what your clients need is the provocation to just choose to race to the top. And, if I think about Western Union was making oodles of money and optimized for how they could make telegrams more efficient. And so when they had the chance to buy AT&T, they said, no, thanks. And now Western Union doesn't matter. And Yahoo was optimizing for clicks on the homepage. So when Marissa Mayer designed Google to have 2 links on the homepage, Yahoo had no clue as to why that was a good idea, because they weren't trying to serve the user. They were trying to optimize something by turning dials. And so if we re-examine the workflow of where we are and realize there's a lot of people and a lot of conversations going on that aren't necessary, we can actually have fewer people doing more magical work if we're prepared to not be so industrialized or bureaucratic about it and let people sing.
Yeah, interesting. Been thinking a lot about innovation, and you speak a good bit about how giving people that clarity of where you're headed. When you talk about work that's significant, you're not saying everybody needs to figure out which way we're going to go. You actually need to take a stand and say, this is where we're going to go. Now, what ideas do you have? How can you innovate? What skills can you bring to the table? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Okay, so what's the leader's job? Not the manager's job, but the leader's job. The leader's job, first and foremost, is to use whatever leverage they have to create the conditions for this to occur. That you can't force someone to care. You can't force someone to be alive and bring their heart, but you can create the conditions where that is possible. And then the second thing is you need to relentlessly raise the standards. We are not looking for obedience. We are looking for agreed upon standards. Because if we can agree on the change we seek to make and who we seek to change, then we can get back to work. So when I worked with 300 other volunteers to build the Carbon Almanac, my job, in addition to making sure the right people were in the room and building the structure, was to say, these 3 pages are good enough. These 3 pages are what we're trying to do. If it's better than this, fine, but don't waste your time making it better than this because we have 250 other pages to go. But it needs to be at least as good as these. Every chart we have to build has to be better, at least as good as this one. And the language has to be at least as clear as this language. Here, do you understand this standard? Now go build the thing. And so there was no argument about, you're stupid, you're ugly, I don't like your glasses. It was, let's make this paragraph better. Let's make this chart rhyme with that chart. And everyone can get out of the way when we agree on that. But that's not what you see at most corporations. Most corporations are, I wonder what Bob Dobalina is thinking. Let's see if we can read his mind. And then we get stuck.
David is upstairs laughing because it's your page 19, right? We have a chapter that this morning has gone back and forth 18 times. And finally I said, you know what? I think it's good enough.
But don't say it that way, Karin. This is very important. The words good enough are not an excuse. They are a definition. If you don't think good enough is good enough, you better redefine good enough. But once you define, so let's think about the Lexus, which wins every year as the best built car in the world. With an electron microscope, I can show you every single part is defective. So should they never ship a Lexus? No. Once it is good enough, by definition, it met spec, out the door it goes.
So it's about getting clarity about what success looks like.
Correct.
And a standard that is going to serve without, yeah. So if anyone is listening and has a question, this is your time. Oh, here's Eileen McDar. So she says, what I hear is that we yearn for autonomy, achievement, and meaning. That's a personal driver as well as an organizational goal. Thoughts on Eileen's comment here?
That's a great summary, Eileen. The corporation doesn't strive for autonomy, achievement, and meaning. The corporation strives to make a difference for the customers it seeks to serve and make enough money doing it, they can do it again tomorrow. And if you can be clear about the change you seek to make, then the people on the team can take it somewhere. But if you don't know what the change is, I'm just doing my job, which are some of the most horrible words in the English language. I'm just doing my job, doesn't matter. Well, then that's what you're going to get.
Yeah. So where do people start? I heard comments, oh, this is the best conversation I've heard in 2023. So that's good. So you've got people thinking. And as we close, what would you leave them with? Your main message to what to go do?
Let's get real, or let's not play. Don't pretend. This is too important. You don't get tomorrow or Monday over again. What are you waiting for? Right? That every person who's listening to this has more power and wealth than the last king of France did. And we have extraordinary resources. Some came at great cost. We completely crippled the planet we live on, the only one we've got. We have created caste systems and social injustice and misogyny, all in the name of getting the factory working better. Okay, So we got that. Now what are we going to do with it? And so the urgency here is not to do the convenient thing, not to say, what's the one TLDR easy thing to do so I can check this off and go race after the next thing. This is the work of our lives, is to make our work worth doing. So how can we point to it with pride and say, this is what we left behind? So what I'm asking people to do is talk about it. If you buy the book, that's great, but that's not the point. The point is, where is the difficult conversation? How can we recognize that we have to have a job, but we don't have to work here, which means this is voluntary. You showing up to do what you did today is voluntary. Is this the best you can do? Are the people with you in sync that this is the best they can do? Because to settle for anything less is heartbreaking.
Beautiful. So thank you so very much for being on Asking for a Friend to Get today. Yet again, the book is The Song of Significance, and I highly recommend it will make you think. So thank you so much, and we will see you next time on Asking for a Friend.
Make a ruckus, everybody.